Beloveds, and there are so many of you here this morning because this is such an important and exciting day. Beloveds, it is so good to be with you in this moment at a time such as this, when so much feels so uncertain and unknown. Recently, I was in conversation with several of my colleagues as they considered what to preach on the Sunday following the election. I was lucky, that was my Sunday off. How, they wondered, do we affirm fear and grief and rage? And then how do we find hope? What do we tell our people, especially when we ourselves feel so uncertain? I know many of my Unitarian Universalist colleagues last Sunday were preaching community. Community is what saves us. Community ultimately is all we really have if we're fortunate enough to have it. I like to play a little game with myself where I wonder if we took a survey of the congregation, what people would say Pastor Emma is always preaching about. You can shout it out if you have a thought. Capitalism is bad. It's probably one. Well, I'm not really sure, but for a UU, she seems to really like Jesus. She makes a lot of pop culture references I don't understand. Maybe. Just maybe some of the things we'd hear. I do think that it's true that just about every minister has one sermon that they preach over and over and over again. And I hope that you have caught on that what I preach is community is what saves us. Beloved community. I preach community and I preach beloved community. There is a lot that is just plain old unknown right now. There is so much that feels hopelessly out of our control. All indications suggest we are possibly entering a dark and even dangerous period of collective history. I want to remind you that it's always darkest before the dawn. And now is the time, it is time to get with your people. I encourage you to grieve and to rage, but do not despair. Now is the time to make moves and to save everyone and everything we can, because there will be casualties in this fight. Marginalized folks, mutual aid workers, activists on the fringes have a saying: we take care of us. But it's not just a saying, it's an oath and it's a commitment. Beloved community, if ever there was a time for us to make the commitment, to take the oath, to take care of us, that time is now. It is how we will survive. It is where we will find solace and comfort and joy, which we need desperately to make it through this. We take care of us. Today, Steve Chamberlain will unveil the work of the CVUU's Accessibility Task Force. Over a period of several years, the ATF has endeavored to determine how we, the Cedar Valley UU, can be as accessible as possible. One of the questions they have endeavored to answer is, what are the barriers to entry at the CVUU? And barriers to entry can be literally physical, but they can be other things too. Barriers to entry concern the obstacles an individual might face as they attempt to become part of a group, whether that is how they will literally get in the door, whether they have financial or social, psychosocial issues that might make it difficult. The more barriers to entry, the less likely an individual is to become a part of the group. It's our responsibility as the CVUU to determine what some of those barriers to entry might be, and then to do whatever we can to break down those barriers. One of the most obvious barriers to entry concerns our building. At present, our building is not accessible to people with physical disabilities. We have stairs leading up and leading down, and those create a barrier to entry. A person who cannot safely use stairs cannot be an RE teacher, for example, because that's where our classrooms are. A person who cannot safely navigate stairs at present must travel all the way around our building to the back door if they wish to attend fellowship after Sunday worship. So in second hour, Steve will present the findings of the Accessibility Task Force, and he will unveil the two options that we have right now. The first option is a capital campaign that would likely begin in February of 2026. If the CVUU manages to raise $1 million, we can build an elevator and make other improvements to our space. The second option is to negotiate a purchase of a building that currently belongs to the United Church of Christ. This building is at the very end of University Avenue in Cedar Falls. It's across from some student housing. It's all on one level, and so it solves our issues of physical accessibility. Now, the UCC church that owns that building would want to share that space with us, essentially as renters, for an indefinite period, probably of several years. So both options that Steve will present have their benefits and their drawbacks. Frankly, I'm sort of hoping for some magical yet unrevealed third option. Maybe you have an idea of what that might be. As the weeks go on, we're going to discuss this all at length. None of these decisions will be made in a rush. It is true that we have a pressing need to make our building physically accessible for members who need it now. Those members are here now. They struggle to access our space. And what do we know about these, bags of bones and meat that house our souls? They break down eventually. All of us come into this world temporarily abled to some degree or another. There will come a day, if we are fortunate enough to get there in years, that just about every one of us would appreciate an elevator instead of the stairs. So none of this is going to happen overnight, even with that increasingly more pressing need. Both of these options require thoughtful planning and lots of negotiation before we act and make final decisions. And this is even with all of the planning that the ATF has done on the front end. I cannot impress upon you enough the remarkable hard work the Accessibility Task Force has done in service to this beloved community and its future. We all owe them our appreciation for that foundational work as we begin to determine the next steps as a collective. Maybe let's take just a moment, let's clap our hands and hoot and holler for the ATF. Now listen, I'm not going to tell you because it's not my job, and neither is Steve. It's also not my role. And Steve isn't going to tell you either what the best option is. We're going to determine that together. We believe in democracy. We believe in congregational polity. Polity is how we do things, how we govern our organization. So we'll make that determination after a period of ongoing discussion and deep discernment. In many ways, we're just getting started. Recently, a regional staff person at the UUA described Unitarian Universalism as a toddler religion within the lifespan of world religion. So we're not talking about the Unitarians and the Universalists. We're talking about that merger that happened in 64, 60, 62, 61, 62. Do I have 62, 60, 61 or 62? Jerry Chamberlain says it's 61, so I believe her. 61. So in the grand scheme of things, we're not quite brand new, but we really might as well be. There's a lot we're still figuring out about who we are and what we mean in the world. It's part of the reason we call Unitarian Universalism a living faith. We recognize our relative youth. It encourages us to lean into the discomfort of continual growth and transformation. With this framework of development in mind, I consider the CVUU to be at the adolescent stage of our development. Well, there are many of you who have been around here for a long time. I'd still put our developmental age right around 12 years old. We are growing. We are in this peculiar time that is very uncomfortable, body, mind, and spirit. So think back to just a moment, to being 12 years old. And don't think about it too long, because being 12 years old, especially if you're a 12-year-old girl, is one of the worst things that can happen to any human being. But you might recall that at 12, your body and your brain are growing at an uncomfortably rapid pace. You're growing out of your jeans and your shoes before you've even broken them in. You probably have zits. Maybe you have lots of them. Without deodorant, you stink. You're suddenly growing hair in places where there was previously no hair. And emotionally, you are a mess. You're just beginning to figure out who you are, and you might not know for decades to come. It is a wildly uncomfortable time, even in the best circumstances. At the CVUU, we're experiencing a like period of uncomfortable growth. Our needs and our desires are quickly outpacing our resources. Well, we know we would thrive with full-time staff in all positions, especially in administration, but in music and religious education, we simply don't have the money to pay for that. Full-time staff require benefits, even part-time staff. That health insurance is pricey. This pressure of inadequate staffing puts a lot of pressure on our paid staff, possibly to do more than is fair and reasonable, and it also threatens to stagnate our growth. Our growth in membership creates a need to expand our programming beyond Sundays. Programs like small groups and weekly meals help to foster relationships among individuals, and those relationships then connect them and draw them into the larger community. We don't have the staff or the volunteers to organize and carry out such programming. We have 148 members at present, but our volunteer staff, our core volunteers, our volunteer leaders, it's still a very small subset. And let me tell you, they work real hard and they are burnt to toast. Oh, and by the way, we're bursting at the seams in a building that does not meet the accessibility requirements of many of our members. So this is an exciting, but it's a very uncomfortable time. Feels in many ways like we are balancing on a thin precipice. Do we do all we can? Do we transform into a butterfly? Do we do everything we can to grow? And if we don't, what will become of us? A lot of pressure is put on ministers, and I'm not complaining. There are also a lot of perks to ministry. Some of that pressure is to grow the church, all from the power of our sparkling personalities and incredible worship skills. We're often called on to make hard choices about staff or budgeting or priorities. And we're pressured to care for members in exactly the perfect way that makes everyone feel the most loved and nurtured, even if they don't tell us what they need or how best to care for them as individuals. And funnily enough, at the same time, UU ministers, you know this, don't have a huge amount of authority within the congregations they serve. The only explicit authority I have is in this pulpit. I am free to preach what I believe without fear or favor. I also have the authority to determine who gets to share this pulpit with me. And that's ultimately because I am accountable to the harms committed from the pulpit, whether they come out of my mouth or the mouth of a guest speaker. The congregation has authority over the building. We share responsibility in determining and following our congregational bylaws. The duality of the expectations of ministerial leadership and limited actual authority is funny and sometimes frustrating. One of the ways I navigate that duality is by reminding myself that at its core, ministry is witness and ministry is companioning. I am here to hold space, to offer my insight when it is warranted, and to follow along beside you as you be the church. I was recently reminded of the ministerial ideal of non-attachment specifically to outcomes. It is true that my vocational training gives me some insight into human behavior and how systems operate and how organizations survive and persist. But the decisions made by the collective are made by the collective. It is my job to encourage the work and then to detach from any and all possible outcomes. In the words of a wise colleague, ministers do their job to the best of their ability, and leadership does their job to the best of their ability. And then we detach from outcomes and we see what happens. Non-attachment practice is bolstered by two states of being: wonder and interest. I wonder what will happen. I ask myself, whatever it is, it will be interesting, is my answer. In this season of uncertainty, of big possibilities and new challenges, I'm recommitting to this practice of detaching from outcomes. I'm asking myself questions like, I wonder how we can draw in newcomers and help them feel more a part of the community. The answer, well, whatever we try, it will be interesting to discover what works and what doesn't. Or questions like, I wonder what will follow this season of adolescence at the CVUU. The answer, I have no idea, but it will certainly be interesting. A lesson I am always learning is that the future is unpredictable. I have no idea what is going to happen, how any given thing will work out. I can see what might influence that possible future. I can try to make the best decisions with every fact and understanding that I'm able to think of and to learn. I can resist fear and find hope. I can seek joy whenever possible. I can reach out to my thought partners, my mentors, my colleagues, all the people I am blessed to be acquainted with who know more than I do about ministry and about life. I can pause for a moment to appreciate my companions on the journey. I can pray for a better tomorrow and a bright future for the CVUU and the world. There is much work ahead. The path is unclear, but we are on that path together. I believe, and I am pleading with you to believe it too, that there is nothing we can't do if we do it together. We can raise $1 million. We can move to a new space. We can dream up a magical third option, and then we can make it real. Or we can do nothing. We can stay in this uncomfortable adolescence, and then we'll probably regress. That sounds terrible. I recommend we find another way, a way that transforms us, a way that brings us forward into a bright future of our own making. And so I invite each of you to recovenant with me and to each other, to do what is ours, to share whatever responsibilities we are able, to lean on our connections to one another, and to deepen the connections you already have while discovering new people here and connecting with them. If we do that, we make the interdependent web stronger than anything that might threaten to break it. Beloveds, we were made for times such as these. We are blessed and we are made better simply in our being together. How can we be together in such a way that the barriers to entry and inclusion are minimal and the welcome extravagant and sustainable? How can we take care of us? We are enriched and we are forever changed when we do the work of church, regardless of the outcome. May our values of love, equity, and transformation inspire us to action. May we never stop dreaming of what is possible. May we remember our covenant to gather together in the spirit of love, to grow in wisdom, and to strive for social justice. May we grow in relationship with one another and the divine. And may we be transformed, mind, body, and spirit. May it be so because we make it so. Amen and blessed be.